Hello, Inkrats. We're back with some more Colorado Avalanche franchise mode in FHM 12. And in this one, we are going to start the year 2 simulation after having a very active offseason in which we were forced to trade away a few players here, including Brock Nelson to the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for a first-round pick. Also going with him were the rights to Mikhail Gulyayev and a third-round pick, which ended up being Dmitry Borochev. Now, Gulyayev is 21 years of age, still a one-star ability. I wasn't exactly high on him, so that's why I decided to trade him away. And then as for Nelson, 34 years of age, he's still a great player, 4-star ability, don't get me wrong. But at that 7.25 cap hit for the next 2 years, he's just not somebody who we were going to be able to afford, and we'll see our cap situation in a minute. You have Valeri Nichushkin as well going to St. Louis in exchange for just a 5th-round pick. I know that was a very underwhelming return for Nichushkin. He's now a 3-star ability. He was a 3.5-star ability last year, but unfortunately, again, same situation, making 6.125 for the next 4 years. Just not a contract that we were going to be able to afford moving forward. And then we traded for Pius Suter from the St. Louis Blues in a separate trade in exchange for the rights to Delalecci and a 7th-round pick, so very cheap acquisition for our center core. Then we also re-signed Jacques Khan for $3 million for 2 years. He was very good for us last year, 43 points in 65 games played, so I figure that's a good deal. Then you have some more cheap depth in Evgeny Dodonov, 1.5 for 1 year, Kyle Burrows, $900,000 for 2 years, Vladimir Tarasenko at 3.9 for 1 year, so just some veterans going to replace Nichushkin, right? And then you have Ben Gleason, $900,000 for 2 years. I believe he's in the AHL. And then Rodrigo Abols for 1.05 for 2 years. So a lot of cheap depth there that we needed, because as we take a look at our salary cap situation, we are currently at $93.3 million in salary cap, meaning we are roughly 1.6 away from the cap ceiling. So those were trades that we definitely needed to make. And I did not want to trade Gabriel Landeskog, just given how much he means to this franchise, because he's making, $7 million 3 years at 2.5-star ability. That's not ideal, but I would like to have him retire as a Colorado Avalanche, or at the very least to see out the remainder of his contract, right? And then something else I think we also have to consider at some point soon is the possibility of trading Devon Toews, because he's 32. He's currently making 6.25 on his contract, or 7.25 on his contract on his cap hit for the next 5 years and a no movement clause. He's going to be 37 by the time that ends. We're not going to be able to afford that moving forward, especially with, obviously we somehow managed to get Kel McCarr at a discount, only 7.3 for the next 5 years on his contract extension. I would have to imagine that's partially due to the fact that he did not play a single regular season game last year due to a major injury that he suffered in the preseason. But still, it's not a good situation that we're in cap-wise, because obviously you have Natchez, who just rolled over to his new extension, now worth $11.5 million for the next 8 years. And I'm hoping that, once we reach the playoffs this year, that is not going to have the same kind of performance as he did this past playoffs. Only 1 goal, 1 point in 6 games played. So that was not ideal. And this is going to be a big year for your Colorado Avalanche. Heading into next offseason, it might get pretty ugly. Obviously, we're still going to be, as long as we have guys like McKinnon and Natchez and McCarr, we're still going to be a very good team, right? But that being said, McKinnon is already 31. Taves is 32. Landeskog is 33. This core isn't exactly young anymore, right? And even Natchez and McCarr, they're already 27. They're in their prime already. We don't really have any young players who can potentially replace them later on in the GM mode, right? So I think this year number 2 is going to be, I wouldn't say this is the last year that we're going to be in the playoffs for a while, because obviously, like I said, as long as we have McKinnon, Natchez, McCarr, we're going to be a good team. But with that said, I don't think we're going to have a better chance to win the Stanley Cup than this year. I honestly, last year number 1 was our best chance to win the Stanley Cup, but we obviously didn't even get past the first round. And a lot of that, I think, was due to poor goaltending, especially with Scott Wedgwood. We held on to Mackenzie Blackwood because he was decent for us last year. Last regular season, he had a .909 save percentage. During the playoffs, he had, a .907 and 2 shutouts as well. So Blackwood proved that, or maybe not proved, but at the very least gave me some hope that he could potentially replicate that performance, right? And then we also have the rookie Ilya Nabokov coming in this year, 23 years of age, 2.5-star ability already. So we're going to see what he's about. He has yet to play in the NHL, and we'll see if he can put up the same kind of performance as Mackenzie Blackwood or if he's more like Scott Wedgwood. Hopefully the former. So that being said, let's just go over our roster one more time just so we know what we're working with heading into year number 2. You have Blackwood and Nabokov in net. On defense, you have Makar, Taves, Akan, Gerard, Malinsky, Middleton, and Burrows. And at forward, you have McKinnon, Natchez, Lehkonen, Colton, Drury, Suter, Tarasenko, Landeskog, Dadonov, Baraboulet, Gushkin, Bardakov, Abols, and Brindley. So with that, we will get underway with the year 2 simulation. All right, we're on December 1st. We are 13, 11, and 1. We have been on quite a slide as of late, and I'll show you what the schedule is looking like. So we actually started out very good in October. So we went, I believe it was 12, 4-1 through October. First game of the regular season, you have a 7-5 loss against LA, so didn't start out great. Then a 4-1 loss against Utah, but a 5-4 win against Dallas, 5-1 win, 4-1 win, 5-1 win, 6-2 win, 5-1 win, 4-1 win. We were winning a lot throughout October. 6-3 wins, 5-1 win, then a 3-0 loss, 2-0 loss. Fair enough. But then November happened. So you have a 4-3 win against Tampa, 4-3 win against Edmonton, 4-3 loss against Vancouver, 5-1 win against Anaheim. And then the slide happened. 5-2 loss, 7-3 loss, 6-3 loss, 2-1 loss, 2-1 win, fair enough, 5-2 loss, 10-1 loss against Minnesota, and then a 2-0 loss against Montreal. And here we are on December 1st. That was quite a slide, and it's not something that we can afford to really keep up for much longer if we intend on making the playoffs this year. As we are currently sitting 5th in the Central Division behind Winnipeg, Nashville, Dallas, and Minnesota. And in terms of the wild card, we are just barely in the wild card. It's not a good November to have. So we're going to take a look at the stats, see who's doing what. McKinnon with 29 points in 25 games played. No surprise there. Natchez with 20. Lehkonen with 20. 15 for Tarasenko, Akan, and Makar. Makar, I expect a little bit more out of. Then you have Landeskog and Taves with 14 points. Drury and Malinsky with 12. Suter with 11. Gerard with 10. Baraboulet, Abols, Brindley, and Middleton with 8. Bardakov and Colton with 6. Gushkin with 3. And then Burrows and Dadonov with 1. And then in goal, you have, oh boy, an .874 save percentage for Mackenzie Blackwood. And then for Nabokov in 10 games played, he has a .901. So Nabokov, he was actually pretty good to start out this season, but it looks like he, along with the rest of the team, has not been good as of late. Yeah, it's this is fun. The goaltending in this game is just, don't you love it? Oh man. What to do. I mean, I would like to give Blackwood the benefit of the doubt, considering that he was relatively consistent last year, 909 save percentage in the regular season, 907 during the playoffs. He had those 2 shutouts as well, right? But this is not a good start for Mackenzie Blackwood this season. 874 save percentage in 16 games played. Whew. And I mean, we had, like I said, we had a good start in October, and so did Blackwood, but his numbers during this past month just plummeted. And I mean, I would have to imagine part of it is the 10-1 loss against Minnesota. I assume that was Blackwood in there for that game. Let's see. I mean, it was fair enough. It was both of them for roughly half the game each. But then there was also, of course, the 7-3 loss against the Islanders, the 6-3 loss against the Rangers, 5-2 loss against Buffalo. We were really poor defensively and in goal this past month. Like I said, I want to give Nabokov more of a chance, and then I also think Blackwood deserves the benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, we're paying $5.25 per year for Blackwood for the next 4 years. If he doesn't get back up to respectable stats pretty soon, then we're going to have to consider trading him, I think, because we can't afford to be wasting that much cap hit on goaltending that may or may not be reliable, you know? So is there anything else I can do? Oh, Devon Taves is already down to a 3-star ability. He started this season at a 3.5-star. I think it might be time to at least consider moving him, because he's going to keep dropping. If he's already a 3-star ability at 32, he's going to get even. It wouldn't surprise me if he was going to be if he's a 2.5-star ability by season's end, or maybe by the start of next season, right? Oh, and that's not favorable, especially with the no movement clause on his contract. 4 more years after this year at 7.25. Oh man, that's going to be. Oh boy. That's going to be a pain to move. That is going to be a pain to move if we don't move it soon. And even now, it might still be a pain to move even if we traded him now. Let me just see what I could get. Let me just see if I offered him out to the rest of the league. Let's just see what the league would offer. A 3rd round pick. Yeah, that looks like it's about as much as we would get for Devon Toews. I mean, I could try to offer him out manually. Like I could try to find a trade manually, but I doubt we would get much more. Maybe at most like a 2nd round pick. And obviously that wouldn't help our circumstances right now, right? That wouldn't help the slide that we've been on. If anything, it would make it worse because, Toews is one of our better defensive players. But obviously we're going to be, in a cap crunch for the foreseeable future, as long as we have players like McKinnon and Natchez and Landeskog and all those guys, right? Yeah, I think the most we're getting for Devon Toews is a 3rd round pick because I just tried offering him to Philly. Philly can't afford him because their cap ceilings, like their cap hit's basically at the same place as ours is. And I offered him to them because they need lefty. That's the only place they're weak in. They are a win now team according to their team status and according to their record. And they still, obviously they can't afford him, so that's basically a no-go. And then the only other team on his no trade list that I figured made sense was Vancouver, at least in terms of their weakness and then their current outlook being balanced, but their current record says otherwise. They're only 8-17 and 1, and they can afford him in terms of their salary. They're only at 85.6, so we could technically trade him there. But even then, the most I was able to get, like even a 2nd round pick is only just a well-balanced offer, so that's not necessarily going to work. I would rather not trade any other prospects or picks the other way. So a 3rd round pick is genuinely, I think, the best that we're going to get for Devon Toews. This is very unfortunate. And it's a tough place to be in for sure, because obviously we're trying to make the playoffs, right? I want to hold on to as much defensive depth as I can. But at the same time, Devon Toews, in a year's time, that contract is going to be very difficult to get rid of. It's going to be very difficult. So I think the longest we could probably hold on to Devon Toews is the trade deadline or maybe the draft, maybe the upcoming draft, but I don't think any longer. And the thing is, in order to improve our lineup, we're going to have to get rid of some cap, right? Because we're basically up against the ceiling. We have 1.5 in wiggle room, essentially. So it's certainly a tough spot. I don't think there's any move, like any obvious move that I can make right now besides trading Toews. And it would essentially have to be for a pick. I mean, I suppose I could trade for, another veteran defenseman on the left side who's not on nearly as long of a contract and has like a similar cap hit, but that might be a hard find. So I guess I'll just take a look at the trade block to see what's out there, but I'm not expecting much. Okay, so you have Jonas Brodin on the Minnesota Wild, who's on the trade block for them, but I would have to imagine, their cap hit's also in a rough spot. I'm not sure if they would be able to make this trade. I mean, Toews doesn't even have them on his no trade clause list anyway, so wouldn't even matter. But that said, we could acquire Brodin in a separate trade, right? So, say we unload Toews for a 3rd round pick and then we trade another player, or maybe even trade that 3rd round pick for Brodin. I mean, it sucks because Toews is obviously a very good defensive player, but I really don't think it's a good idea to hold on to his contract moving forward. And what we could do with Brodin is we could just retain 50% of his salary, right? That way he's only making, roughly 2.75 per year. Let me just see what it would take to acquire Brodin here. And apparently, according to their team outlook, they're currently in a rebuild, which I don't know if I believe that considering their record. They're above us in the standings. I mean, I think it was like 16-8-1. Yeah, they're 16-8-2. They're first in the Central Division. So I don't really buy that, but I suppose maybe a 2nd round pick and then some prospect we're not going to use. We could get him for a 4th and a prospect with like a 1.5 star potential. They're willing to really go low for him. So that might be a good ad, especially at half retained salary, even if it's only for, the rest of this year. And then we could probably move him easier than we could Devon Toews, right? If we had to. I mean, Brodin's a good player. He's certainly a good player. He's pretty good defense. I mean, the 11 hitting is not the greatest, but overall, he's a solid defensive player. You compare him to Toews, I mean, he's essentially the same kind of player. Even the hitting's only 13 for Toews, so hitting isn't exactly his strong suit anyway. And then his strength is only at 11 as well. And you compare that to Brodin. Brodin has 14 strength. So both players are roughly the same in terms of the kind of build they are. Brodin is slightly better with strength, and then Devon Toews is slightly better with hitting. But overall, look like mostly the same player, except Brodin is on a much more manageable contract. That's the key difference here. So I think this might be a smart move, getting Brodin for this playoff run and then not being constrained by the lengthy contract, right? And then just move Devon Toews for a 3rd round pick. Yeah, I think that might have to be the move. I don't want to risk Toews dropping anymore, because if he does, then that's going to be really difficult. Yeah, I think we have to do this. Offer trade. So I'm going to wait for that trade to go through before we move on from Toews, but I think Toews is about to be moved for a 3rd round pick here, unfortunately. And the Minnesota Wild have indeed accepted our offer of a 4th round pick and the rights to Ivan Yunin in exchange for Jonas Brodin at 50% of his salary retained. So what we're going to do is offer out Devon Toews once again, see what we can get. And it will, of course, be nothing but 3rd round picks. That's okay. So first we will accept this trade from Minnesota. There it is. And then going back to the shopping page, who are we going to trade him to? Let's trade him to a team that actually needs lefty and then also could probably afford him. So the Rangers, they need lefty. They're currently in a rebuild, apparently, and they have more wins than losses, technically, if you only count regulation losses. Ottawa, no. Philly, Philly makes the most sense, I think, at least in terms of their weakness. But again, their salary situation is similar to ours. So I'm just trying to find the ideal fit here. Vancouver, no. Vegas. Honestly, none of these are really the ideal fit. Let's take a look at the Rangers. Oh, the Rangers salary cap is even worse. They're at $94 million. Yeah, really none of these make sense when it comes to some sort of available, whether it's the salary cap situation or the team's status, like if they're a rebuilder or a contender, right? So I think we just need to pick a team and just let them sort it out. Oh, actually, wait. I see a second in there from Philly. I didn't even notice that. Yeah, that might have to be it then. That we might have to trade it to Philly. You know what? Obviously they have their cap situation, but they're offering the 2nd round pick, so I assume they have a plan for what they're going to be doing with the salary cap situation should this trade go through. So you know what? They had the best offer, so I will take it. There you go. Accept offer. We got a 2nd round pick for Devon Toews. So thank you for your service, Devon Toews, but it was certainly time to move on. So there you go. Welcome to the Colorado Avalanche, Jonas Brodin, and we'll see what he can do. So now where does that put our salary cap? We're at $89 million, so we have a little bit more breathing room as expected. Still not exactly ideal, but the key to that trade was, of course, unloading a contract that was going to be pretty unmanageable if we waited much longer to trade him, right? So I think with that out of the way, we'll go ahead in the simulation and see what happens in December. All right, we're now on January 1st, and we are 23-15-1. All things considered, that was a pretty good month. That was a pretty good month of December. I believe we had, 2 or 3 losses? No, 4. So that was 4 losses during that month, but all in all, a pretty good month. Blackwood's numbers did get a bit better. He's at 882 now. Nabokov's unfortunately got lower. He's at 897. So that's not ideal, but at least for the moment, we're looking pretty good. So I think we can advance probably to the trade deadline. Oh, first major injury of the year, Girard, 2 to 3 weeks. I'm surprised it took this long. All right, so we're at the trade deadline with 39, 26, and 2. Good enough for 3rd in the Central Division with 80 points. We are 8 points ahead of the Winnipeg Jets, so we are in a good spot. And now let's take a look at the player stats. You have 88 points for Nathan MacKinnon, 67 games played, 50 goals already. Najis was 70 point per game player. Landeskog with 58. He continues to be an effective player even at 34. He's actually grown his talent to a 3.5-star talent. He's had quite the year. So it's certainly very good to see out of him, especially with his contract. Then you have Lehkonen with 56, Makar with 46, Malinsky with 45, Akan with 36, Drury with 31, Girard with 30, Brindley with 27, Suter with 26, Tarasenko with 25, Brodin with 13 and 37 games played for us, Barre-Boulet with 21, same for Colton, Abols with 19, Middleton with 14, Bardakov with 13, Gushkin with 7, Burrows with 6, and Dodonov with 4. And in goal, you have an .894 save percentage for Blackwood in 45 games played, and an .885 for Nabokov in 25 games played. So goaltending this year has not been great, but overall, it's been a solid effort. There are some players that we need to re-sign this upcoming season. You have Lehkonen, you have Suter, Tarasenko, which I'm not sure if we're going to be re-signing him, Nabokov, Girard, Colton, Dodonov. So let's just see what all these guys want. 5.7 effectively for Lehkonen for the next 2 years. That's not bad for him at all, especially considering what he's done this year. Tarasenko, let's just see, almost $6 million for 1 year. No, I'm going to hold off on him. Suter, 5.6 for 3 years. What's he currently making? $4 million. Dodonov, can't imagine I'm going to re-sign. $2 million for 1 year, but even still, you know, he's getting up there in age, and he frankly hasn't been much of a game changer this season. Nabokov, 1.5 for 3 years. I mean, I guess that's a decent deal, but not really a fan of what he's done so far. 885 save percentage. Gerard wants 6.2 for 3 years. Colton wants 4.9 for 3 years. That's only with 21 points. Not sure what to think about that. So I don't know if I'm going to re-sign anyone right now. I think that might be something I hold off on until after the playoffs. However, with that said, I think I would like to stop it here just in case there's any trades that I happen to think of between now and the next episode that I would like to make, because I'm not entirely sure with this team. You know, like, obviously we're still a good team, but it's a bit concerning what we've seen, especially out of the goaltending, and then also with, you know, just in general our contract situation. You need to consider how we're going to transition into the next generation of Avalanche players, right? Because if we continue like this with this core group of players heading into the later years of the franchise mode, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. So because I carefully want to navigate this trade deadline, because I feel like this is going to be a pretty big trade deadline for us, I am going to wrap things up here, but not before I thank the channel members. Thank you guys so much for all your supports, and I will see you guys in the next one.